We have a rich set of presentations planned for you. But today's is cancer, gaining the victory. And it's more than just prevention and reversal. And let me open up by saying, you know, Christians are the last people on this earth who should be afraid of cancer. You know, we are the chosen people of the Master Healer. We shouldn't be afraid of cancer. We should be the ones taking it out to all of those others that don't know God. So we're going to talk about how powerful. We want to empower you with not being afraid anymore of cancer. People are afraid of cancer. Just the mention of it, people start shuddering and shaking in their boots. But what you will learn is cancer, just like colds and flu and other things, is a very natural process. And just like you don't die of colds and flu, and you can, some people have taken certain medications for colds and basic flus and actually died from it. And the same thing can happen with cancer. There's these very powerful pharmaceuticals that people are using, and over 90% of the time, they're not necessary. We'll understand a little bit clearer when it is, when they are necessary, when we have that Wednesday presentation that I talked about, studying the 7 factors. But for today, let's kind of focus on this and see why, you know, we are empowered to appreciate and understand the most powerful system known to man for preventing and reversing all chronic degenerative diseases. And that's what cancer is. It's a chronic issue. Cancer is not an acute issue. It doesn't come upon you all of a sudden. As a matter of fact, let me just share with you right from the outset that cancer, most cancers take 7 to 11 years to actually manifest itself. I'm going to talk more about the statistics and how cancer really got out of control. Starting in the 20th century, there was really no issue with cancer before the 20th century. In the 19th century, it was almost non-existent. We'll talk about that later. And see, a lot of you are so young that you think that these things have been around forever. It's been around forever during your lifetime, but the modern medical profession has only been around since the 1840s. And some of these things are the result of environmental and dietary and cultural changes that are bringing on this onslaught of all kinds of health issues. So that Wednesday presentation, you're really going to love that a lot. But let's focus here on cancer, and let's understand why we don't need to be afraid of it anymore. This chart basically shows the 10 leading afflictions that cause death in the United States. And even though this says 1995, the numbers aren't very much different. About 2.5 million people die every year. And I'm using United States figures. I don't know what the figures are here, but that's about the number. It was about 1.7 million in the 19th century, and right at the end of the 20th century and moving into the 21st century, it's about 2.5 million, give or take. And this gives you the figures. We're going to talk about heart, and we're going to talk about vascular diseases tomorrow, but you can see second on the list is cancer. And this represents about 28 to 32% of the population, which is a significant number. So that's what we're talking about. We're going to talk about some of these other issues in later presentations. So let's talk about cancer in the United States. Like I said, I don't know the figures here, but you know, as I look around, you look like a lot of people in the United States. All of you have 2 arms, 10 fingers, 2 legs, and as I notice, your eyes are right above the nose, one on each. So it's a lot of it. It's the same kind of physiology. So I just make the appropriate adjustments up here, but let's hit the central issues here. Cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States. Does anybody know what it is here? Just for the sake of argument, is it second here also? I would assume in the world it is. So I would assume that even though, you know, I always thought Bermuda was part of the Caribbean. So even though my geography is off, I hope my physiology and my anatomy and physiology isn't. But 1/2 of all men and 1/3 of all women will develop cancer during their lifetimes. Now this is the medical viewpoint. Let me go back to a point I made earlier that I went over maybe a little bit too quickly. 100% of the people get cancer all the time. And studies are showing many people have cancer 5, 6, 7 times during their life. One of the biggest issues, which we'll talk about later on Wednesday, is, and the whole cancer issue is the diagnostics. We had no diagnostics for cancer years ago. And so these figures basically reflect when you actually detect cancer. And the tests are designed so that when a tumor gets a certain size, that's when they see it. But most cancers take 7 to 11 years to develop until they get in. And some of them, like pancreatic and liver cancer, take 20 years. So by the time they found it, it's been going on for a long time. And we're going to talk about those issues that started this process. And so even though it says 1/2 to 1/3, they're talking about diagnosed cancers that they actually work on. But everybody gets cancer all the time. But the immune system is usually strong enough to fight it off. You know, everybody is subject to germs. What we're going to talk about is the germ theory. You're going to love this, Greg, Wednesday. And some of the misgivings of that germ theory. But for now, let's kind of understand. This is what they say. 1/2 of all men and 1/3 of all women. One of your first questions is, why the disparity? And a lot of it has to do to the physiology, the hormonal makeup. You know, women actually have some advantages over men. Did you know that? It's almost impossible, I'll make this statement tomorrow, but just to put it in context, it's almost impossible for a premenopausal woman to have a heart attack. It's almost impossible because of the hormonal mix. But after menopause, they have about the same mortality as men. So there are a couple of things. So when you see these figures, there are some differences in the sexes. One of my favorite presentations is for women only. I have a lot of fun with that one. And for some reason, I see a lot of men there. I guess they want to find out all these secrets about the women. Okay, but millions of people are living with cancer. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And when I'm talking about living with it, diagnosed and undiagnosed, many people don't get it treated at all. And then when you stop and think about it, in these third world countries where they don't have money and doctors and everything, you don't hear any pandemics of cancer. You hear about starvation a whole lot. You don't hear about a whole lot of dying of cancer. So there's a lot of people out there with cancer. And this first hit me when I first became a naturopathic doctor, and I saw these people who were coming in to our practice, and they're talking about, well, oh yeah, I've had cancer for 17 years, I had it for 28 years. And it was in California. California is strange people. And they just came in for some colonics and some herbs. They didn't want to make any changes. They just realized that, and if they didn't tell you they had cancer, the point is, you would know they had cancer. You know, they were full bodied and everything. And then you had these other people who you know, they get a couple of bouts of chemotherapy, and they're often looking like some very serious depletion of their systems and deterioration of their form, etc. The risk of developing most cancers can be reduced by changes in personal lifestyle. That's the point we want to make here. So cancer is a disease characterized by uncontrolled division of cells and the ability of these cells to invade other tissues. So that's what cancer basically is. And so there's basically there's the normal cells, which are fully formed. They're nice and round and defined, and there's spaces in between them, and they grow and divide, and they die in a very orderly fashion. Just like skin and hair and nails, you know, we are always going through what are called a catabolic and anabolic phase. We're always breaking down and rebuilding. You break down your hair, your nails, your skin, and they replaces each other. When they don't break down, let me give you an example. Osteoporosis is an example. If you take certain medicines that stop the bones from breaking down, osteoclastic activity, which breaks them down, and then you stimulate them with osteoblastic activity to build it up, the bones do well for a while, up to a year or two, but then they're very brittle. And those people that do those kinds of medications, they have higher number of hip fractures. So you might seem okay for a minute or two. And that's the same thing with some of these medications. For a while, it can, but then the body says, I'm not designed to work, and it completely collapses. That's the same thing with cancer. It needs to go through this orderly function. When it doesn't, then you see this clumping in these abnormal cells that don't die in an orderly fashion, but outlive the normal cells and continue. You see how clumpy that is and undifferentiated as opposed to over here? That is where the cancer starts becoming a problem, and then you can detect it. So why do cancer cells develop? There's a lot of different theories. One of the best books I've read was The Definitive Guide to Cancer. It's written by a couple of medical doctors, actually. It's one of the best books I've read. And it talked about some 26 different alternative therapies to chemo, radiation, and surgery. But they did a really good job in talking about the different ways, the different theories, and different aspects of cancer development. But one of the key ones is that the DNA becomes damaged for a lot of different reasons. Damaged because of diet, lifestyle. A lot of times it's things that you are not even responsible for. A lot of them are environmental in nature. And a lot of them, quite frankly, is because of lack of knowledge. That's why this is so good. You know, the Bible says in Hosea 4:6, my people are suffering, are destroyed for lack of knowledge. You just don't know. And that's why, and we made the point yesterday, how many people have learned, had 1 hour on health in all of their education, all through elementary school, all through high school? Not 1 hour. You might take home economics or some other thing. You take all kinds of history and geography and math and sociology, a whole lot of it. You know nothing about the basics of the human frame. So most often, though, a person's DNA becomes damaged to exposes to something in the environment. And that's the point that I was making. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at how it develops. And you hear of these 4 stages of cancer development. And you see right down in the very beginning, a lot of times this is undetectable. And see here, something can be going on, and people have cancer, and many times the body spontaneously takes care of itself. Interestingly enough, some of the issues we get is the opportunities we have to cure basic cancers that don't get a chance to develop. Let me give you an example. When you get a cold, some of us are running so much and doing so that the body has all this congestion, we get a cold, and that's the first time we stop. We have to be forced to stop. And then we do some smart things, and when we talk about the colds and flu, and in the process of taking care of the colds and flu, guess what? You got rid of the beginning cancer. So remember yesterday I talked about one of the things that we need to do, we need to start applauding our symptoms. When we get a problem, rather than running to get rid of it, the headache or the cold or the sniffles, stop and pause and say, okay, here are the dietary and lifestyle factors that God gave me. These are His laws. It's just like when we're getting a whole lot of trouble and bad temper and everything, we start going through those 10 commandments. Oh yeah, well, you know, maybe I should love my neighbor a little bit more, and maybe I should pray a little bit more. Maybe I should go to church. You start listening, and you notice your behavior starts getting better. You get away, and the same thing with health. You should say, oh, what laws am I breaking? Not how can I go past these laws with some kind of medicine, whether it's herbal or pharmaceutical. And so this is kind of interesting. That's why I purposely wanted to focus on this show, because a lot of the cancers we get rid of because of other issues that we have to take care of. And sometimes it's skin issues, sometimes it's asthma. Now, sometimes we get these issues and then we take medication, and then this thing gets a chance to develop. And so most of us don't focus on this until we get an exam and then we're in one of these stages. Then all of a sudden, there's a big panic. And one of the things that happen in the medical profession is they kind of create a sense of, first they scare the daylights out of you. I mean, just looking at this, if they told you this was a mushroom, you look, this is ugly, this is horrendous looking. So get rid of it. And the other thing is they create a sense of urgency. All of my clients tell me that. Oh, look what we found, and look how ugly this is. And we got to get rid of it by next week. You're already scheduled. Don't think about it. Don't get a second opinion. And if you get a second opinion, going to 50 different oncologists, it's not getting 50 different opinions. It's getting the same opinion 50 times. You have to go to a different kind of modality, a different kind of a protocol. So be careful about these second opinions. So when people come to me after their second and third medical doctor, their personal doctor, their oncologist, I say, well, now you're going to get your first valid second opinion. Because what I'm going to tell you is very different than you're going to hear what you heard from the other guys. And then you can make an informed decision. And I respect whatever decision that is, incidentally. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So stage 1, there's this small and contained within the organ that it started in. Usually when you see this, there's no reason to panic at all. This is when you should really be encouraged. So, wow, I am so happy I saw this. Let me take stock of what's been going on in my life. Second one is it's localized, but the tumor starts getting larger. And a lot of times this is when the cancers are being caught. I worked with tumors the size of grapefruits and seeing them shrink in a matter of weeks to the size of a lemon. And usually by that time, people don't want to pay my consultation fees already. They got it. They stop coming, and then when I talk to them months, it's gone. It disappears. Just like when you get a pimple or you get a fever, bliss, or whatever, it kind of resolves itself if you don't keep doing the things that's causing it to develop. And then when it starts found in the lymph nodes, in the affected areas, it's starting that metastatic process, and then it starts to get problematic. Okay? And then the fourth phase is then when everybody starts pushing the panic button. Family, friends, associates, your doctor, cash register, because this is a lot of money. Lots of money going to cancer. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I tell people that if you had to pay for your cancer treatments, nobody or very few people, you'd have to be very rich and very foolish to go through the medical approach. It's very expensive. That's why they don't like people like me talking about this, because you might have to spend a few $100s for some herbs and some for consultations, but you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, $50,000. And for in the United States, they have this doctor right now. He's basically telling people they had cancer, they didn't have cancer. And he was putting them through all these chemotherapy. He was making a whole lot of money off of scaring the daylights out of people. And women are the ones who are intimidated the most. As soon as they get a little lump in their breast, all of a sudden, oh yeah, let's biopsy, let's put all kinds of things. So we'll talk about some of that, and I hope there's some questions from some of you women. And ask me about the mammograms, etc. And I'll tell you what my view is. But essentially, once it's metastasized, that's a term here, that means it starts spreading all over the body. Now let me ask a question. Let me pause for a second. It's in the bloodstream and everything. And let me just ask a basic fundamental question, just to get a view. How long do you think you can live with cancer, even fully metastasized cancer? What do you think the record is that's reported in the literature? Yes, ma'am. What's that? 5 years. Okay, that's a good answer. Anybody else? 7 years, okay. It takes 5 to 7 years for it to develop, so 7 years is a good answer. 5 years is a good answer. Okay? 10. Well, the answer is 47 years. It's the longest one, and this happened to be a 47-year-old woman who had stomach cancer. She had a tumor the size of a grapefruit. Now, I'm not recommending that you do what this woman did. I think what she did was foolish. She refused any kind of treatment. As a matter of fact, she was a little bit demented. She thought she was telling everybody, no, it's not cancer. She was pregnant. Now, she died at the age of 94. It gruesome, but let me ask you a question. Did she die of cancer? She died of old age. So now most people, they're better off being demented sometimes and not doing nothing. As a matter of fact, the studies show that those that do nothing at all, does not mean that do nothing at all, live longer than people that do chemotherapy and radiation. Now, let me give you another context. So I wanted to kind of put that out, and my best example is this he was in his late 90s. He was the father of a famous doctor who was a natural health doctor. And I don't want to use any names, but the particular incident, he died at the age of 98. But he died all of a sudden. He died after 60 plus years of marriage. And he was working up until 2 weeks before he died. His wife died, and then 2 weeks later, and he was a very active, healthy guy. And when he died 2 weeks later, and plus the point I made, he had a lot of money. So in this particular case, when he died in 2 weeks, they thought there was some foul play because the wife dies, and all of a sudden he dies, and so they did an autopsy. And this guy who wrote this book, he wrote a really good book on Ebola, and so you probably read it, Greg. You probably know. But anyhow, what they did when the doctor came back, and the son said, well, what's the situation? The doctor said, I don't know how this guy lived. He had cancer in every single organ of his body. He had full metastatic cancer. The interesting thing is he never went to doctors. He never even went in for checkups. I don't know what the case is, but I think he died of a broken heart. I think he died because he was with his soulmate for over 60 years. He had no reason to live. So he didn't get up to go to work anymore, and his body, just the cancer overcame him. So one of the things that I think is killing people is stress. They get so stressed out over it that they talk themselves into an issue. So what is the number one carcinogen? I don't need to spend a whole lot of time because a lot of us know about this, don't we? We know that that's a problem, but what we might not know is why. Cigarettes by themselves are a problem. Tobacco, they got insecticides, herbicides, this, that, everything. All by itself, there are hundreds of chemicals that are in tobacco, processed tobacco. Now, the real issue is when you light it up, when you cook it, all of a sudden you have 4,000 different chemicals. Can you imagine your body your poor lungs trying to deal with all of those chemicals? Things like arsenic and nicotine and tar and methane and acetic acid, carbon monoxide, paint, butane, all of these things. We are clearly fearfully and wonderfully made. See, the more information you have, the more you realize, wow, why am I worried about anything? This body is tough. And we're scaring ourselves to death and letting other professionals, and not just medical doctors. I know some naturopaths, they're making a whole lot of money. I know naturopaths that sell $300, $400 worth of supplements to you. All kinds of, and one of the questions came up, vitamins and mineral supplements. They're useless. I don't use them. I don't use them for myself. I don't use it in my practice. No vitamins and minerals. I use supplementation though. Most people need more. Everybody needs supplements. But the supplements we normally need are fruits and vegetables and selected herbs, which are rich pharmaceutical. These are God's manufacturing facilities for providing us everything we need to function at optimum performance. So I don't need to spend a whole lot of time. I have a whole presentation just on that. But this is something I do want to pause and spend a little time on. One of the people I worked with, I work at a lifestyle center every now and then, which is kind of a 19-day facility where you go and you get to listen to me for 14 days just running. I have a good old time because I run my mouth, and you're captive. You're out there and there's no place to go. So I got you. Anyway, and then you do, and they love it. This guy happened to be a rich guy. He was a bodybuilder, massive body, and he had cancer like 3, 4. Every time he gets cancer, he would come to this facility. And he never really understood why his cancer kept coming back. Because, you go through, he had a lot of money, so he went through all of the massage and the cleansing and all that. And it literally went away in a matter of weeks. And 9 months, a couple of years, once you got it, and you keep doing the same things, it comes back faster and faster. This is one of the things that he had a lot of money. He would buy thousands of dollars. He had these big, huge freezers. He'd buy all of this meat, and it was organic meat. That's interesting. Don't get confused by the facts. He'd buy all it, and he loved these charbroiled steaks. And he would charbroil them. And when he saw this, incidentally, he never came back again after he saw this. the benzopyrene in the smoke, you know, the charcoal, it puts off that steam, and that benzopyrene that's put up, it goes in, and you know, the fat, it drips off of the meat, and it processes, and it goes up into the meat. A 2-pound steak, charcoal broil is the equivalent of smoking 600 cigarettes. The guy, oh, he had lung cancer. That's the one he would always get. And the guy was massive. But you know, he basically had a generally healthy lifestyle, but there's this one little thing. And so basically a natural health is a lot about being a detective. It's like the young lady asked me about an issue earlier. I said, well, I'd like to know a little bit more about the diet, about the life, because you can't make these glib statements, and you can't be talking about a whole lot of things that aren't appropriate. Everybody has their own culture, their lifestyle, their dietary habits, and so it's better to kind of hone in on this person's diet, lifestyle, working conditions, family history, etc. So this is another one of my favorite charts, because a lot of times, especially women, I've mastered the art of not busting out laughing when they come in and say, well, it's in the family, it's genetic. Especially when you get this breast cancer, oh, it's genetic. And you know what's really sad? For preventive cancer, you know what women are doing? And now a lot of these socializers, they're doing these double mastectomies. And you know what? They will never get breast cancer. They'll die of other kind of cancers. Because cancer basically is a systemic issue. It manifests itself locally. It manifests itself in the weakest part of the body. That's why smokers get it in the lungs. That's why painters get it in the kidneys. You know, putting their hands in all of that paint remover and everything. And you know, also the smokers get it in the lips. Women get it in the breast. A lot of times because it's too much cow milk and cow stuff. You know, you see these, look at this delicate young flower next to you. You over there that's looking down at your notes that you shouldn't be looking at. What is she going to be doing with an 800-pound cow's hormones in that little frail body? So that's what we're inheriting, is the diet and lifestyle of our parents. But let's look at this a little closer. The most famous study is the China study, because one thing about the China study, unlike most cultures that is heterogeneous, in China everybody's Chinese. So you can go to 625 villages and they're all Chinese, so the only difference is diet and lifestyle. But this is another one, and that's another one. If you ever get a chance, and as a matter of fact, I met the head, the leader on that, T. Colin Campbell. He actually wrote the foreword for one of my books. He was one in that China, the London, Cornell, China study.
The China story?
The China study, yes. That was back in the 60s. Look at this now. These are Japanese people. And what this is saying, these are the different cancer types. And I really like this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is they're all Japanese, number one. In Japan, this is the incidence of cancer when they're in Japan. Okay? This is what it is when they move to Hawaii. Now, they don't change their ethnicity when they go to Hawaii. They change their diet and lifestyle. And Caucasians in Hawaii. What's interesting is, when they move to Hawaii, they have about the same incidence of cancer as Caucasians. They start living the diet and lifestyle as Caucasians in Hawaii, which is what the China study showed. When they went to the cities, they had cancer. When they moved back home, they literally got well. Look at what's interesting about this, and I'm going to come back to this. Look at stomach cancer. In Japan, the incidence is much higher. You see that? Anybody see? That's important. And look at that. They moved to Hawaii. The question that you want to ask is, what's the difference? You got it. And one of the people, and one of the questions yesterday, I think it had to be yesterday, that was when I first started taking questions, said, I want to know a little bit about fish. I said, well, I'll tell you about some fish. And we're going to tell you, they eat a lot more fish. When they're in Japan, the diet is much more varied. when they get in hard. They still eat fish, but not as much. They're eating more like Caucasians. So look at this. I'm going to come back to this. That's what I like that's so powerful about this. It has nothing to do with genetics, or very little to do. Now, you can have a genetic predisposition, but that doesn't mean anything. You know, it's like you can have a gun. You can walk around with a gun, and you can hold it here all your life. There's no problem until you pull the trigger. So if you exercise those triggers that will make manifest the genetic predispositions, yes, you can get these things. So I like this because it really tells a story in a net form, and I don't have to go through the full China study because you got to kind of build it, and people kind of get it when they see this. And I'm going to come back to this stomach issue. And it has to do with something called biomagnification. You know what that means? That means biologically the magnification of certain issues. This is the biomagnification of DDD, okay? Which is it's an insecticide. In this particular case, let's say in this they measured in Clear Lake, California. In the water itself, there were 0.02 parts per million of this particular insecticide. Now, in the plants, the phytoplankton, the plants that were in that water had 5 parts per million. See, so as you go up the scale, up the biological scale, it starts magnifying. You can hold more of it. Water doesn't hold a lot of it. Once you get it in the plant, it can hold a little bit more. And then by the time you get into the herbivores, those fish that eat plants, then they have a little bit more, 40 to 300 parts per million. Look what happens if you eat the fish that eat the plants. Now, I'm not talking about the fish that eat the fish. I'm talking about the fish that eat the plants. So you can just magnify this more from the fish that eat the fish. That's why the Bible tells us don't eat certain fish. You only want to eat fish that are vegetarians. So up to 2,500 parts per million. That's what biomagnification is. And that's why it's important. This is part of the fish story. Let's look at the rest of it. DDT analyzed in the breast milk of human mothers. There was a question that came up yesterday. And I said, well, kind of hold off on that. And if you remember, he said, what about those apples that have the herbicides on it? Okay, now, the DDT analyzed in the breast milk of human mothers who are exclusive vegetarians. Eight % of vegetarians had significant amounts of DDT in them. So yes, you have it, but you can see in the spirit of this biomagnification, a much lower percentage. And we don't know what the rest of the other things that they were doing, but the vegetarians, they had 8%. Look at those that were non-vegetarians, though. Meat eaters had 99% significant levels. So you see this biomagnification is the issue. And so you're starting to get a sense of this fish issue. And there's more and more cancers in these island areas, in Japan, I don't know what they are in Bermuda, but I know in the Caribbean, there's a real major issue because of all the fish that's being eaten. And then the other part of the fish story is the omega-3 issue. And all of these experts, natural and conventional, is telling everybody, one of the questions I got yesterday was, what about my fish oil? And I said, hold off on that. Okay? Omega-3 is very important. It stops cells from clumping together. It's good for vascular issues. It's good for inflammation issues. It's very important part of the brain. It's very important. So this is where you get confused by the facts. You don't get a lot of omega-3 in the standard diet, the standard American diet. So what they want to do is they want to throw these fish oils at you. So let's talk about it a little bit. And this is, remember I said I had a presentation, The Truth About Fish? This is a subset that focuses on this particular issue. The problems with fish oil, it can worsen blood sugar levels in diabetes. So yeah, you're doing all of this omega-3 for this one thing, but you're unwittingly causing another problem. Large amounts can dangerously prolong the blood clotting time. Okay, so yeah, you have good omega-3, but you bleed out all over the place. It's expensive. It's much more expensive than what I'm going to show you. Large amounts cause vitamin overloading or vitamin deficiencies. Okay, we already talked about seafood being a large reservoir of infectious diseases, and we'll see why in a second. Toxins acquired from contaminated waters concentrate where? Always in the fatty tissue of what? Of everybody. That's why it's hard to get sick if you're lean. There's no place for the poisons to hide out. And look at all of this. All of the kind of things that are in the water. Now, you don't have it as much as people that are in the rivers and in the closed areas of the United States, but there's still the sewage overflows, the faulty septic system, the boating waste. That's all getting all in the fish. And poisons run off from farms and city streets. Big problem in the United States. Did you know, not that you care, but did you know that more pigs live in North Carolina than people? And all that runoff and everything, and in the water. And so, of course, they have to chlorinate and fluoridate it. Those are known poisons, though. They're carcinogenic. You know, they kill insects. But in large doses, they kill big insects with 2 arms and 2 legs. People. Cholesterol content of various fish oils. They all are higher in cholesterol. From 73 all the way up to well over 100 milligrams of cholesterol. So if you're worried about cholesterol, you don't want to do the fish oils. And you can get them that are low, but they're so much more expensive, and you don't need it to begin with. So there's all kinds of contamination. As it says here, polluted water concentrate toxins up to more than 1 million times more than detected in water. See, that's that biomagnification. So it could be in the water, and they're holding even, so they're transporting fish and animals on an excellent transport system for all kinds of things that cause cancer. You see that point, the point that's being made there? Toxins in their fatty tissues include pesticides, chlorinated hydrocarbons, mercury, dioxin, and they're finding it's so bad now that even cold water fish, even wild salmon have not as much, but they have mercury. It's all over the place. And so even though Bermuda is out here, don't think that you're isolated in the Garden of Eden. It's coming out here also. Fish can also be contaminated with PCBs and heavy metals, which is a big problem. Petroleum, hydrocarbons, many of them are banned now. But you know, the damage has been done all for like 20, 30 years before the laws came into place. Led all kinds of issues. You know, there's evidence linking fish to the contamination in cancer. And fish, even fish have more cancer now than they had 50 years ago. Okay. This is particularly important. I could have almost included this in the presentation yesterday when we talked about children. But you know, a lot of young kids, babies, leukemia, etc. It's really sad. And they got all of these telethons, and it breaks my heart because it's so easy to address a lot of these issues. And they're brave and heroic, and they don't know anything else. They've been like that all their life. It's really sad to see it. But let's look at this PCBs and the reproductive system. And the point I want to make here is if you want to have children or if you're pregnant, you really want to pay attention to this. The major ongoing source of PCB exposure for the general population is the consumption of fish. PCB may affect the sperm counts and fertility. You know, my son, I talked about how, you know, I don't want to have any kids. I have 5. And I say I have no credibility when it comes to natural birth control. Both times we had our 2 young kids, the 16-year-old and the 11-year-old. Soon he's going to be 12 this week. We were going through a cleansing program. I mean, it breaks through everything. So I've actually worked with people with fertility issues, women in their 40s, executives who pay $30 for all these fertility clinics, having 2-3 miscarriages, and so they said, well, let's go to the crazy naturopath. We have nothing to lose. And then they wind up with twins. I have many of those cases, several. So I have a lot of credibility when it comes to fertility. None. But the point I want to make here is when I had my last kid, this was in 2000, John Michael, he was 32 then, my son, my second son, David. He said, you know, I thought he was calling me to congratulate me. He said, Daddy, you can still have babies? What do you? So, and I said, I was 57, I remember. And I said, David, what are you talking about? He said, well, the doctor said I have a low sperm count, blah, blah, and he said I was hereditary. Oh, I said, yeah, that's right, David, you're right. I think I told Dr. Hodgson that the way I got into health is I was blessed with poor health. I had all kinds of health issues. Skin problems, allergies, I was a pincushion, chronic bronchitis, all that kind of stuff. But I really never paid attention. This is a good story about men. Men, you can scar them up and this and that. A lot of men come to me as clients because they lost their sex drive from the medications. And what can you do to get, they don't care about anything. Give them the sex drive back and they'll hop on. They'll do And I can relate to that. Because when I was 35, I lost my sex drive for 2 weeks. I worked with IBM. I was making a six-figure salary. Had this nice curly afro. I was dressed. And I said, what do I have to live for? I mean, it was the most devastating thing that ever happened in my life. And, you don't go and tell anybody about that. But when David called me, I said, oh, yeah, David, that's right. Yeah, it is right. And I did have a blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, you got to change your diet line. See, I had already made I started making these changes in my mid-30s. Right around, as a matter of fact, that was around the time. All the other things, I still was trying to do the vitamins and the minerals and this and that. Boy, I really paid attention to these alternative protocols. So long story short, I told him he had to change his diet, he had to get rid of the macaroni and cheese. Now he had this cute little wife. She's like 4 foot nothing. She called herself 4'11". And when he first married, she was a cute little thing. But you get old, and when you're 4 foot nothing and put on weight, it's not like being 5 foot something. You understand what I'm saying? So she was cute. You can kind of, she was cute. But she was in her early 30s, and I remember her saying, I'll do anything you say. She called me Dad, But I'm not giving up my mac and cheese. I said, well, you don't have to do anything. All I'm going to do is tell you this. And I said, well, you do it whatever you want. Long story short, she tried for a few months. She finally gave up. She gave up the mac and cheese. She got back that fig again. And I think that might be the reason why. But anyway, at the end of the year, they have a kid. And that's one of the few of my grandkids that is younger than my youngest kids. Most of my grandkids are in their 20s. and that's it's kind of an aside. It affects everything. It doesn't just affect hair, skin, nails, and lungs and organs. It affects everything. As a matter of fact, you want to stay tuned for the presentation when I talk about some of the real issues with dairy. I kind of started yesterday. But let me tell you right now. Wait till I get to it here. PCB-contaminated fish eaten by pregnant mothers are linked to alterations in birth size, gestational age, and changes in neonatal health status. So you're affecting your kids. And children at 11 years of age with high exposures to PCB before birth show impaired intellectual development. So pregnant women in particular want to pay attention to this. Not just fish, but diet and lifestyle. See, a lot of times, and it's sad, I see some of these women, they scoffing down the Diet Coke, and they think it's okay to gain 50 or 60 pounds. You're only supposed to gain about 20 pounds when you're pregnant. 20, 25 pounds. And they call it a badge of courage, or maybe a license to just put on huge amounts of weight and get all these cravings and everything. But you're responsible for another human being. So I just want to kind of share that perspective. So let's look at plant foods now. I mean, plant foods are loaded with all kinds of omega-3s, from avocado, turnips, the oils, even banana. See, so God has it everywhere. Now, and there are certain foods Certain manufacturing facilities, what's a manufacturing facility that's for the purpose of maintaining and enhancing our vitality and health? What is that called? What's that manufacturing facility? It's called a plant. What do we call a plant that makes cars? We call it Ford or Chrysler. Now, God has his plants. They're called apples, peaches, pears, plums. They're called fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds. Those are manufacturing facilities to give us all of what we need. So you don't have to go to a fish to get it, or to a bull or a cow, or a horse that they're passing off as a cow burger, or whatever else is going on. You understand? This is an important chart. I want you to focus in on this. Okay, this is, again, you'll hear me use expressions. Don't get confused by the facts. This is one of those. But in the spirit of being scientifically accurate, I wanted to list where the highest sources, you probably can't see this thing in the middle here. It's kind of washed out. So I'll tell you, can you see it? Who's the one with the good eyes? The third one is canola oil. Okay? And I highlighted it. You can't see it. But flaxseed oil is the highest. Look at that. Look at the amount. See, that's why I tell everybody, use flaxseed oil. You can put it in your smoothies. You can do all kinds of things with flaxseed oil or the seed or the oil. And as you can see, walnuts, certain nuts and seeds. Now, canola oil is 1,094 if you can't read that. And then you see the black walnuts all the way going down to the almonds. So God has given us fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. That's the point I want to make. Now, there's a major food interest out there trying to push this canola oil. And they say it's low in cholesterol. True. It's high in omega-3. All of that is true, but what they're not telling you, this is one of the worst foods you can put in your body. So don't get confused by the facts. Okay? And that's why I'm saying, go back to the hierarchy of nutrients. What is canola oil? Can anybody tell me what a canola plant is? Anybody, tell me the definition of a canola plant. No such thing. There's no such thing as a canola plant. It stands for Canadian oil. And there's this arrangement that the United States, they pay the United States some $50 million to put it in their GRAS list, generally regarded as safe, GRAS. And it's one of the worst foods you can put in your body. It comes from the rapeseed. If you don't know what the rapeseed is, it's a mustard seed. It's what they made mustard gas out of in 1914. And what they do is a hybridized rapeseed, so they took out some of it, but there's still some residue in there of this mustard gas that they used to kill people. And it causes a whole host of problems. And if you want my 4-page article, that's not on my website, put me a note and I'll send it to you. There's all kinds of problems with canola oil. It's so bad that it's very inexpensive because it grows like weed. It is a weed. It grows wild in Canada, and the insects won't eat it. They don't even need insecticide. It's so cheap. The bugs won't eat it. So they send it over to the Americans and they don't know any better. So I wanted to put some context, and in the spirit of being scientifically accurate, don't get confused by the facts. Canola is in that bottom part of the chart. That's why I said I'm going to show you how powerful it is. Yes, Greg?
Can you speak something about the purslane we have here?
The what?
Purslane.
Purslane?
Yeah.
What about it?
It's a weed that grows here and in the States.
I don't know that much about it. Maybe you can tell us at the end when we do the question and answer section.
I wanted to mention about the ratio between the 6s and the 3s.
Oh yeah, well, no, I wasn't going to get into it, but I can. The problem is the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s, the omega-3, 6, 9s, and most of the foods you get a sufficient amount of the 6s and the 9s, but you don't get enough of the 3s, and that's why you need to get another source of it. But the reason why I don't get into it, and I don't get into a lot of facts. Let me tell you why I don't get into a lot of facts, because if you go by the hierarchy of nutrients, you don't have to know anything. All you have to do is know God. And all you have to do is know what He gave us. And so all you have to know is you eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, and you eat as much as you need to, the percentage of your diet from 10 to 80% based on what your requirements and capacities are, and you will solve over 90% of the diseases. So I wanted to give a very simple way of cutting through all of the education. Now, I have 3 doctorates and a PhD. I'm glad I learned a lot of this stuff. I probably have about 6, because you keep learning more and more data, but there's no real information. And so what you really need to do is get down into a real comfortable mode of where you are. So I used to do a lot of research. And that's why I said, I don't know about a lot of these things anymore. A lot of these things, you know what I do? What I say to them, where does it fit in my hierarchy of nutrients? And that's my starting point. And if it's down here, and I have these world-class 9th degree black belts in network marketing, everybody and their brother wants me to promote their product and be on their there's one group, they said they would give me $20,000. They would guarantee me $20,000 a month if I signed up for their product and did presentations on why, because you can see I'm pretty assertive, I have a lot of facts. They wanted me to promote their product. And I looked at it and I said, I can't do that. It will kill my integrity and my credibility, which is way more important than my pocketbook. Especially as a Christian, how can you do that? So you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, and they're nice people. A lot of them, they used to be my friends. and you know what they do? They send you all of this free stuff. As a matter of fact, when I was getting ready to come out here to Bermuda, I found this nice, I said, this binder. I was looking for a transparency binder where I can put all of my handouts so I can show people all the different things that they're going to be getting. And we didn't have one. It was getting kind of late. And I found, and this is beautiful. I had all of this stuff in these charts, and that was a part of this big package that this person sent me. It's not in here. And it gave me all of this product, and I looked at it and read it and I did my research. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't promote it. Person can't stand me. And I go to the Y, and I go to workout. The person gives me the cold shoulder. I said, well, what are you going to do? So that's really get that. And if you really embrace that hierarchy of nutrients, nobody, friend or foe, nobody will be able to fool you or get you off of the track of practicing the most powerful system known to man for preventing all chronic degenerative diseases, adding 15 to 30 productive years to your life. That's what I want to do. I don't want to confuse you with a lot of facts. And I can impress you with the big words, believe me. Believe me, I can. Not as well as some people, but I know the big words. I don't use them anymore. That's what you're right. I use very simple words. But anyway, here's kind of a summary of the list of cancer-causing agents. It's like a who's who. Remember when we took that little brain, when we did the frontal lobe, and we took about all these different things, and when you put it in the context of the dietary, the music, the hypnosis, the home hypnotist with the TV, and all those assaults on the brain, it's the wonder that we're all not blithering idiots. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that's what I'm trying to do here is look at all of these things that we sometimes unwittingly do. Not this group. A lot of us don't do the tobacco, alcohol, but you know, we do the meat, we do the toxins, sometimes wittingly or unwittingly, and then you know, the milk, the eggs, the viruses, all of that is, and down at the bottom, a lot of these grooming products, they're loaded with, you know, like lipstick. A lot of it has lead in it, and that gets into the body. And a lot of cancers, they're cumulative. They're not spontaneous random events. They don't kind of float around in the air and say, I'm going to attack you today. They accumulate. You kind of like that. Yeah, some people think that these are kind of a boogeyman and randomly attacking people. It's not doing that. So let's talk about reversing cancer. Let's talk about a strategy now for making the transition. Okay. And there's basically 2 different modes. I'm going to primarily, of course, focus on what I'm competent in is the comprehensive lifestyle. There's surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And unfortunately, people know more about the latter and know nothing about the former. So I'm not going to go into that. We know how damaging it is. And it's really sad. And when I do these presentations and I go to these old age homes, etc. And I remember I did this once, and this nurse came to me and said, yeah, you know, there was this lady that was here. She was 76 years old. She always had a great personality, this, that, and the other thing. She found out she had cancer. She did that chemotherapy, and 6 months later she was cursing at everybody. Her personality was changed, and 3 months later she died. And there's no reason. She was buoyant, vibrant, but then, you know, she probably wasn't doing a whole lot of medical tests beforehand. But, you know, once you get in there, and these are very well-meaning people, but it's sad the things that people subject themselves to. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the conventional. We can talk about that more. I'm going to talk about this more when we talk about those 7 factors that I talked about on Wednesday. But let's come back. This is that single chart. For those of you that are new, just bear with me. Read my hierarchy of nutrients. This is the single chart where I can talk 20 minutes to 20 hours. And some of you know, say, I think he can. Probably not. I think he can. Don't test him. But anyhow, this basically talks about the health continuum from abundant health, which is less than 5% of the people. Here's where most people are, suboptimal health, 70-75% people. And then you really want to understand and implement this chart. That's why I put it back here. This is the first major one that I can get people's attention. When you talk about the brain, you really don't see what's going on. And it can take 20, 30 years for the brain to get compromised. For some people, it takes 70 years. And then what happens? Then you get Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or senility or dementia. You know, all these. It takes a long time. See, let me make another point. The central nervous system is very, very powerful. It takes years to break it down. That's why it takes a long time to build it up. It can take up to 7 years to fix it. That's why people won't do natural things. They do all this other unnatural. They don't get better, but they won't hang in there. And I've worked with cases of MS even, and people have recovered using natural, and they're getting progressively worse, trying to manage it with pharmaceuticals. But the point is, you really want to pay attention and understand the implications. See this guy over there? He's just plucking his way up, moving up the chart. And this is what I'm saying, based on your requirements and capacities and what stage you're in. Now, if you're stage 4 cancer, and you tell me you don't want to do my natural diet, I say, well, I understand. I can't take any more of your money and your time. Because I can't be responsible. It's not going to work as far as I'm concerned. So I won't work with you. And only a naturopath who wants to soak you for $500, $600 worth of supplements will continue to work with you. And the sad thing is, that's actually better, not for your pocketbook, but that might be better in terms of long-term outcome. But it's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to change your diet and lifestyle. And a lot of people, even when you see people with cancer, those that recover, they from the chemo and the radiation, and about 20% do, they actually, it's a wake-up call, and a lot of them, they stop the smoking. They stop the bad habits. That's why, do you know what the definition of a cure of cancer is, incidentally? This is what I've always found profound. The definition of a cure for cancer is that you don't have a manifestation of it in 5 years. So if they diagnose you with a cancer 5 years and 1 day, it's counted as a cure and a new cancer. Now, I said it takes 7 to 11 years, so they're telling you the normal 7 to 11 year process, by the time we're finished with you, we're hoping that you make it to 5 years. And they're praying, because then you're cured as far as they're concerned. And some of the more difficult ones, I said, it takes even 20 years. So based on your requirements and capacities, you want to be high on the list. I worked with one guy that was given 6 weeks to live. Now, he died 9 years later because he refused chemo and radiation, but he had a huge tumor that was blocking his bile duct. He was misdiagnosed. They called it a form of gallbladder liver cancer. He actually they found out later he had endocrine cancer, endocrine nerve cancer. But he actually resolved it, but he would refuse an operation, but they had to put a hole through the tumor. He didn't take it out so that he can get the bile through, so that he can break down his food, because he basically lost like 60 pounds in 6 weeks. He was going fast. He was given literally 6 weeks to live. His cancer was so bad that even when we started him out, we had to start him out with, he can even do 8 ounces of carriages he was spitting it up. And we kept giving it to him until he can hold 2 ounces, and then they built up to where he can do the 20 ounces. And as a matter of fact, he used to go to Johns Hopkins all the time. And see, the problem he had is because he had a stent in there, and it would always get backed up, so he'd always have to go and get it cleaned up. And that's really why he died, because one time they made a mistake. They had a couple of stents, and they put him in the wrong places. And because they did that, the gallbladder exploded in his body. They had to clean all that out. And at one point in time when he went in, he agreed to do the chemotherapy after 9 years. He was kind of in a foggy state, and they told me, well, you know, this episode you got to do this. And he took a couple of doses of the chemo. He did get better. He got lucid, and he literally put on his sneakers and ran out of the hospital. But his body was so weak that when they tried to do the juicing and everything, he couldn't recover. But the point is, I work with people with 4th-stage cancer. Now, what really saddens me is when people come to me with 12 inches of their intestines gone, 2/3 of their pancreas, part of their gallbladder. You know, there's not much I can do. You know, I'm not a miracle person. You know, as a matter of fact, the statement I want to make is the less intervention you have, the faster and more complete your recovery is. But there's hope for just about everybody. Now, this is the normal food pyramid, which is what the USDA will tell you, is that it should be grains, etc. The point I want to make is that this is not according to the hierarchy of nutrients. So I don't want to say that I'm the same as them. It's a different paradigm. Seasonal fruits, eat as much as you like. That should be the base. And we do a lot of juicing, a lot of smoothies, etc. And so that's what you want to be able to do. You want to go back to God's approach. And then if you remember, I did this back in the first day when I said let food be your medicine. You really want to pay attention to this if you have cancer. And you really want to avoid the bottom section altogether, where you're destroying all of the nutrients, everything that's going to boost your immune system. Now, all pharmaceuticals are immunosuppressant, chemo, radiation, all of those. These are also immunosuppressant. These up here are biogenic, which means that it increases biological and improves biological activity, etc. So you want your living foods, your sprouts, your raw, your juices, and you even can get a little bit into dehydrated, frozen, and steamed. But again, I encourage people to get as close to 100% raw food diet as practical. And if you look at that 2-page chart, I gave you an integrated approach. So you look at that and you'll see the kind of a plan that I put people on. But you want to really look at that hierarchy of nutrients and kind of be cognizant of and practice according to this hierarchy of nutrient preparations as well. And so this is what the overall picture looks like, gaining the victory over cancer. The dietary factors, fresh whole food. I use Tahitian noni juice. It's the most versatile all-natural. Now this is one of those network marketing things that I was very skeptical about when I came out in 1996. I did a lot of testing on myself and my clients in 1999. I actually did get involved. And there's just a whole one of the things. Another side story made me think about with the fertility. 5 of the women sued the company that were part of the research team because they got pregnant. They were all told that they had to take the juice, and they got so healthy, so fertile, and they were on birth control. I mean, it's a sad story. A beautiful story from a health standpoint. But fresh carrot juice, garlic, onions, chelation pesto. I talked to you about that earlier. That's for the heavy metal toxicity, etc. That's in my book. In my natural recipes book, I have a lot of these recipes. And I'm going to talk about the chelation pesto in a later presentation, so I'm not going to dwell on it here. But, you know, avoiding all of those things that are problematic, and I'm going to come back to God's chemotherapy. You want to know what God's chemo is? God has his own radiation surgery and chemo. Anybody? And anybody interested in that? Is that it? That's his chemotherapy? Well, it's pretty close though. But let's come back to it. And then the lifestyle facts, fresh air, sunlight, that is important. Sleep is as much as practical, as much as you need. Contrast showers and circulation. That's another powerful one, but I'm going to talk about that in a later presentation. Hydrotherapy and poultices, especially for women with breast cancer. You put those castor oil poultices with the charcoal or comfrey, it just sucks it right out of the body. Liver, there's really great natural approaches, and I talk all about hydrotherapy and poultices in my website, free. You go to the natural remedies, and I focus on one in the lifestyle center, Dr. Agatha Thrash, who does a lot of that. Medical doctor who runs a lifestyle center. Doesn't practice medicine anymore. And avoid exposure to the toxins. Now, let's go through now and look at what God has told us. He gave us a secret. A lot of these secrets are buried deeply in the Bible. He said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandment, and keep all his statutes, I will put some of these diseases upon thee. Oh, excuse me. It doesn't say everything except cancer, or everything except respiratory issues, everything, you like this, Linda? It's none. And we don't want to take him at his word. But we'll listen to these other guys, people made from dirt of the earth. We'll listen to them, and all that, but we won't listen to the master healer. None of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. You know, when they dig up these mummies, they're finding arthritis in them and diabetes and blood pressure. They had the same issues back then. And he's trying to tell you, I am the Lord that healeth thee. We're going to have a lot of fun when we talk about the 10 Commandments of health. And then, he also told us very clearly in Ezekiel 47:12 and Revelation 22:2. Along the banks of the river on this side and that will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. They will bear their fruit every month, because their water flows from the sanctuary, not from the Hudson River or from the Atlantic Ocean. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for medicine. So let me tell you what God's chemotherapy is. Anybody want God's chemotherapy? Here's God's chemotherapy. It's food and herbs. Raw fruits, vegetables, and their juices. That should be the most of the diet. It has to be anywhere from 40 to, sometimes, in the case of this guy that had 6 weeks, he had to be 100%. So this is where you have to look at, you have to use a little bit of discernment and work sometimes with a qualified practitioner. And then look at the herbs. These are the ones that I have highlighted, the ones that I use in my practice. SEACT is basically the next few herbs. Burdock root is a powerful blood cleanser. Red clover, that's what I use for as part of the poultices for breast cancer and other cancer. Sheep sorrel, slippery elm, turkey rhubarb for the liver, watercress, yellow dock for the liver, chaparral. These are very powerful cleansing and rebuilding herbs. Podarco, bloodroot, red root. Some of these got to be careful. Poke root is so toxic that you really have to use that carefully. But some of these more aggressive tumors, it'll tear it up. But you know, if you're too aggressive, it'll tear up the tumor called a human being. It'll rip up your whole body. So you got to be careful with some of these. Graviola is an herb that grows in Peru. And certain studies show that it's 600 more times more powerful than chemotherapy. But nobody tells you about these things. And there's some herbs here. Somebody was telling me here about these. The thing is, the point is, God has given us so much, but there's less than 2% of the herbs on the planet that have been studied for their medicinal value. And so when you talk, I might not have heard of this, but I might have heard of something else that's like this. They're all over. See, God didn't just say, I'm just going to help people in New York, or people in New Guinea, or people in China. No, God loves everybody. Everybody might not love God, but he loves saints and sinners. He loves the heathen, and he'll spend more time going after the heathen than he will he goes after the lost sheep. He'll leave us Christians behind. He loves everybody. And he's lavishly produced these things everywhere. Every indigenous culture. See, I'm not an expert, but if you had Dr. James Duke, who was the advisor for our herbology course, this guy's a world-renowned ethnobotanist. He goes all over the world. He'll tell you by genus, species, etc., all over the world. He has an 800 herb garden in his backyard over in Maryland, where he is. But these are very powerful herbs, cleansing and rebuilding herbs. Cancer won't have a chance around these, but a lot of us don't give it a chance. Now, who talked about radiation? God's radiation is sunlight. People that have skin cancer, I get them out in the sun. A lot of times the cancer is caused by the suntan lotion because the sun hits it, it breaks it down and the toxic stuff gets into the system, and that's what's causing the skin cancer. The suntan lotion. And let me give you some late breaking news. The darker you are, the more sun you need. So my dark-skinned cancer clients, the problem is they're trying to live like Caucasians. And they think that they can do their 10 to 20 minutes of sunlight like somebody that came from Antarctica or from Alaska and have the same health and systemic integrity as a Caucasian. You can't do it. You need sometimes 6 times more sunlight than your Caucasian counterpart. And the darker you are, the more sunlight you need. And so running around with these umbrellas and suntan lotion is not going to do it. This is God's natural cure for cancer. This is his radiation. It's in sun, and he locks it in the seeds of every fruit. And if you can't get to the sunlight, because you got to be practical about this, then you need to get therapeutic doses of D3. Not some puny 1,000, 2,000 international units. I put my clients on 50,000 units for 3 days, and then put them on $5,000 to $10,000. $5,000 to $10,000. Almost sound like it's chemotherapy. 5,000 to 10,000 units a day as a maintenance dosage. So God does have his radiation, and this is it. Anybody ready for his surgery? What do you want to cut first? Arm, leg? What do you want to cut? God has his surgery. But I'll tell you, this scalpel is tough. Somebody asked me if this was easy. This stuff that I do. And my answer, if you remember, is simple, but it's not easy. It's so simple a child can understand it. But our skulls are so hard, you can't penetrate. No, it doesn't get in. So it's simple, but it takes a little bit of effort. You heard me say, I think it was yesterday, that if we were told not to do the 10 Commandments, we'll all be saints. Because we want to do just the opposite of what God tells us. If he says, don't eat the fruit, we'll eat it. If he says, eat it, we'll run away like anything. So it's simple, but not easy. Now let's talk about, God does want to do some cutting, though. And it cuts deep. And I can tell you from my personal experience. Okay, let me tell you how deep he wants to cut. He wants us to cut out all the poor dietary habits. He wants us to cut out the meat, the processed foods, the genetically modified foods. He wants us to cut out the poor lifestyle. He wants us to cut out the anger, the fear, the judgmentalism, the self-righteousness. All of those things, they rip at us. They rip at the fiber of our being, at our central nervous system, at our emotions, at our frontal lobe, at our poor liver. You know, there's even, in Chinese medicine, they actually associate certain emotions to certain diseases, like fear to the kidneys, and anger to the liver, and things of that nature. And you know, we as Christians, some of us, we're so high up on the totem pole that we think that we can judge others, and we can be self-righteous. And that's why, you know, I have a whole presentation on why Christians get sick. Don't get me started. And we're not called to be judges, are we? We're called to be witnesses. We're not called to be lawyers either. We're not here to advocate, you know. We're not called to be judges or lawyers. We're called to be witnesses. And we should be witnessing to the power of his natural health system. We should be walking epistles as Christians. Cut out all the behavior that's contrary to God's natural laws. Now, tell me, you raise your hand, all of those who think it's easy. Now, I got to put my hand down. It's not easy. We need prayer. We need the Holy Spirit. It's not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit. So it's not easy, but it's simple. Does anybody have a trouble understanding this? It's very simple, but not easy. Okay, we talked about this along the banks. He gave it to us already. He said, obey my voice and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And walk ye in all the ways. He didn't say some of the ways. You know, he didn't say 9 out of the 10 commandments. He didn't say 6. He didn't say multiple choice. He said all of my laws and decrees, remember? And all the ways that I command you, that it may be well unto you. Blessed are those that do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life. What's that tree of life? You know, you can be doing all that tree of life, you can be doing all that fruits and vegetables and everything. If you don't have a right relationship with Jesus Christ, you'll still fall out and die of something else anyway. So let's make sure that our priorities are right so that we can enter to the gates of the city. And what good is it if we're completely healthy from a clinical standpoint and we don't have a right relationship with Jesus Christ? So let's get our priorities right and everything else falls into place. So in summary, conventional approaches to treating cancer address the symptoms. You know, you can cut out this, that, and the other thing, but that's not stopping the process and not getting to the cause. Cancer responds very well to improved diet and lifestyle program based on God's natural laws. We're going to talk about that more later. But I like to end up, as always, saying, you know, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. We're going to get ready for our question and answer session, but I'm going to invite the pastor up to make some closing remarks. Just before I do that, and I'm going to tell you, those of you who can't stay, and I understand that, and I thank you again, this info at IIOM Online, that's where you send your questions. Okay? And that IIOMonline.com, that's where our school is, and that's where all of the information is, where you can get all of the free advice on natural protocols. And then this is the schedule again. So tomorrow, come in if you want to learn about vascular diseases, and you can see the rest of this. So I really want to thank you again. I know there's a whole lot you can be doing on a Sunday, and I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Let me do what I like to do best. Running my mouth, sharing this powerful health message with everybody that will give ear. So thank you very much for your time, kind attention, and wish you blessings and traveling mercies.